"You're in the wrong place. The janitor's lounge is in the back." Lieutenant Collins didn't even look up when he said it, his voice dry, dismissive. She had just stepped into the Lockhart Flight Simulation Center, wearing a faded gray shirt, a weathered baseball cap pulled low over her face, and carrying an old canvas bag. No name tag, no rank, no insignia. She didn't look like a pilot, more like someone who'd wandered in to clean the floor. No one knew who she was. She simply nodded and took a seat quietly in the waiting area, right across from the F-22 Raptor simulator bay, where some of the Air Force's brightest young officers were nervously preparing for the elite test pilot tryouts. Across the room, the other candidates, clean-cut, confident, full of swagger, burst into stifled laughs. "Maybe she thinks this is an arcade." One of them chuckled. "Hey lady, this isn't a video game. Go mop a hallway or something." Another added. They laughed like they'd already won. They had no idea. This story of injustice and eventual redemption deserves to be shared. So, hit that like button and subscribe to follow more true stories of courage in the face of discrimination. Now, let's rewind to see how this explosive situation began. The buzz of the simulator bay was electric with ego. 4 dozen candidates, all male, all hand-picked from top-tier squadrons across the country. The challenge? Survive a full 6-minute high-threat simulation in the F-22 Raptor with no support, no GPS, and unpredictable weather conditions. Fewer than 3 pilots had ever completed it flawlessly. And then she showed up, still seated quietly in the corner. The woman in the worn cap and plain shirt became a magnet for mockery. They didn't know her name. They didn't care. Her presence was offense enough. "Seriously? Is this some diversity stunt?" One voice called out from across the room. "I give her 15 seconds before she flies that jet straight into a mountain." Another chimed in, to a chorus of laughter. It wasn't just jokes, it was dismissal wrapped in cruelty. Like watching a lion's den laugh at a rabbit. Lieutenant Damon Pierce, cocky and loud, sauntered over to her with an arrogant grin. "You got lost on your way to base laundry, ma'am?" he asked loud enough for everyone to hear. She looked up, eyes calm, brown, steady. Pierce leaned in, chuckling. "You do know this is a test for F-22 pilots, right? Not the soap opera club?" A few others were now watching, entertained. Even the instructors smirked but said nothing. Captain Ramsey, the lead officer on site, looked at her like she was a smudge on clean glass. "Name?" he demanded. The woman stood and handed him a printed temporary badge. "Emily Ross, observer clearance." "Observer?" Ramsey blinked. "Who cleared this?" She simply answered, "General McAdams." That name made him hesitate, but only for a moment. Then he snorted. "Well, that explains it. You've got friends upstairs. Doesn't mean you can fly a Raptor." The room hummed with snide comments. Probably some general's niece, or ex-wife, or charity case. Emily didn't respond. She just sat back down, arms folded loosely, eyes still on the simulator data scrolling across the large screens. To most, it looked like gibberish. To her, it looked like rhythm, like music. But no one was paying attention to what she saw. They only saw what she wore. Her silence became its own target. "She's mute now?" Pierce laughed. "That'll help when she's trying to call in coordinates while being locked by enemy radar." Another round of laughter, louder this time. Even the younger officers, those who weren't laughing, avoided her. Like being kind might cost them points. And when the testing began, the contrast became worse. Pilot after pilot stepped into the simulator bay. Some lasted 4 minutes, some less than 2. All exited sweating, frustrated, cursing under their breath. One pilot lost control in under 40 seconds and slammed his virtual jet into a digital canyon wall. The room erupted in nervous laughter. Ramsey scowled. "That's a $200 million bird. Lopez," he barked. "You crashed it like a paper plane." The pressure in the room thickened. So did the bravado. Each failure only made the next candidate louder, more performative, until it was more theater than competition. And all the while, Emily watched. She never took notes, never whispered, never asked a question. She just watched, like someone who already knew how the story ended. But for Pierce, watching her was unbearable. "You know what I think?" he said, walking over again with that same crooked grin. I think you're just here to watch because you know damn well you couldn't fly one of these if your life depended on it. He leaned closer. This test eats up hotshots from Top Gun. And you're, what? Someone who used to fly a desk. No answer. She's scared, someone said from behind. Or smart enough not to try. Another added. Ramsey finally clapped his hands. All right, next up, Pierce. Pierce straightened his shoulders, cracked his knuckles, and strutted into the simulator like a showman entering a stage. As the door closed behind him, Emily blinked slowly, as if nothing had changed. But it had. The tone in the room was shifting. Some of the other candidates started side-glancing at her, not with respect, but confusion, suspicion. Who was this woman? Why hadn't she reacted to anything? No anger, no fear, no arrogance, just that stillness. And somehow, that was more unnerving than any insult she could have thrown back. Because silence in the face of cruelty doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes, it means you're just waiting for the perfect moment. They thought she would never dare. After watching Pierce swagger into the simulator like it was his personal stage, most assumed the show was over. The real competition was done. Time to move on. But then something happened that no one saw coming. Ramsey stepped out of the control booth, fuming. Pierce lasted 4 minutes. 4. And he bragged like he was Maverick. No one laughed this time. And then, quietly, calmly, Emily Ross stood up. Every head turned. It was like someone had hit mute on the entire room. You could feel the air shift. Ramsey raised an eyebrow. You want to fly? She didn't answer, just held up her clearance badge again. He hesitated. You do know this isn't a toy, right? You crash this sim. It's a black mark. Permanently. Still no words. Just a steady walk toward the simulator bay. Someone snorted in the back. Guess she wants to prove us wrong. Another voice. Or prove us right. Ramsey opened the door, motioning toward the cockpit seat. Go ahead. Impress us. Emily stepped in. Inside the bay, it was a different world. The curved simulator dome lit up like a battlefield. Lightning cracked across a digital sky. Wind turbulence roared through surround sound. Target drones appeared in unpredictable formations. Most candidates didn't even make it past Minute 3 without a system error or loss of control. Emily sat down, adjusted the straps, and gently placed her hands on the controls. Outside, no one said a word. Even the most arrogant pilots leaned forward. Something about the way she moved, calm, precise, unfazed, felt different. Initializing simulation, the control tech announced. F-22 Raptor, live fire mode, Stormfront environment, manual nav only. The screen flashed red. Start. Right out of the gate. Emily didn't rush. She didn't jerk the throttle. She just let the machine breathe, like it was alive and she could hear its pulse. At 1 minute 15 seconds, she evaded 2 heat-seeking missiles using a maneuver no one had seen yet in the sim. Even Ramsey leaned in, confused. Was that a reverse Cobra roll? With turbulence? At 2 minutes 30, she downed 3 fast-moving drones with precision shots, one of them mid-roll. While pulling 6 gigaseconds, the room began to buzz. But no one spoke. At 4 minutes, the first missile swarm hit. The part that usually knocks even elite pilots out. But Emily rode the turbulence like a dancer on wind. Her countermeasures launched milliseconds apart. Every flare a beat in some invisible rhythm. 5 minutes. Still flying. Still clean. By this point, even Pierce had stepped back from the wall. Mouth slightly open. No one was laughing now. At 5 minutes 45 seconds, she executed a lateral inverted barrel roll to dodge an AI ambush and then descended into a dead zone canyon, all without crashing her speed or pinging the radar. And then, just past 6 minutes, she brought the plane in low. Smooth, seamless, landing gear down, touchdown, no damage, full kill score, silence, total, absolute silence. Ramsey stared at the screen. The control room tech blinked. Mission complete. All objectives met. Flight integrity, 100%. The automated voice declared. The simulator door opened with a soft hiss. Emily stepped out. She didn't look proud. She didn't look smug. She just looked like she'd done this before. Because she had. And then from the back of the room, a gravelly voice spoke. It was General McAdams. No one had noticed him enter. She's logged over 1,800 hours in live combat. Flown Black Ops missions you'll never read about. That maneuver at minute 4? She wrote it. Emily Ross isn't here for a job. She's here to remind you what real pilots look like. The weight of those words sank deep. Even Ramsey's face paled. And Pierce? He looked down. Couldn't meet her eyes. She walked past them all. Slowly. Not gloating. Not even stopping. And just before she reached the exit, she paused, turned her head ever so slightly. Still calm. Still quiet. But her silence had already spoken louder than any words ever could. Now the room wasn't laughing. Now, some of them looked like they were about to cry. And you, if you're still watching, if you followed Emily's quiet defiance and the moment her truth shattered the lies. Comment the number 1 below if you're still listening to this story with me. Because trust me, what happens next is even more powerful. No one moved. For the longest time, it was just the soft hum of the simulator powering down, and the low, metallic click of Emily's boots on the floor as she exited the cockpit. No applause, no questions, just silence. And yet, something had undeniably shifted. The same room that once pulsed with arrogance and ridicule now sat hollow, like a balloon just pricked. Ramsey rubbed his jaw, avoiding eye contact with anyone. The color had drained from his face the moment General McAdams had spoken. And for good reason. The general didn't just confirm her credentials, he had just turned every assumption in the room into ash. Lieutenant Damon Pierce, once loud and bold, now leaned against the wall with his arms crossed and eyes low, staring at the floor like it might offer an explanation for what had just happened. But it wouldn't, because there was no excuse. A few of the younger candidates looked visibly shaken. One of them, Lopez, took a step forward as if to say something. Then thought better of it. Words felt useless now. Anything said aloud would only highlight how wrong they'd all been. It was the kind of moment you don't prepare for in flight school. The moment when you realize the target of your laughter could have flown circles around you the entire time, and chose not to. McAdams walked slowly to the front of the room. His voice, when he spoke, was even and deliberate. Every year, he said, we test for skill, reflex, decision-making. But you know what we never list on the evaluation forms? No one answered. Respect, he said, humility, the ability to recognize greatness, even when it's dressed in silence and old canvas. He paused. That woman you mocked? She was once the last voice in the ear of a pilot whose engine failed mid-air over enemy territory. Her voice kept him calm. Her guidance brought him home. You don't know his name. You never will. Classified. Another pause. But he named his daughter after her. The weight of his words hung heavy. Someone in the back finally whispered. Why didn't she say anything? McAdams heard. She didn't need to, he replied. Real ability never shouts. It waits. Ramsey cleared his throat, stepping forward awkwardly. His voice cracked slightly as he addressed the room. I take full responsibility, he said, for letting the tone here become what it did. It wasn't much, but it was something. Emily stood near the exit, watching the room, not with pride, not even with judgment, but with a quiet, almost sorrowful distance, like someone who had walked through these rooms before and already knew how they echo. She wasn't angry. She was tired, not physically, but in the way people get tired of proving themselves to those who refuse to see until it's too late. Pierce finally pushed himself off the wall and walked toward her. For a moment, it looked like he might try to save face with some joke or half-hearted compliment. But as he stopped just a few feet from her, he did something unexpected. He offered a small, genuine nod. I'm sorry, he said. She looked at him, eyes unreadable, then returned the nod. Nothing more. And somehow, that was more humbling than any lecture he'd ever received in uniform. Across the room, the other candidates remained quiet. Some looked ashamed, others thoughtful. A few looked like they'd just glimpsed, for the first time, what a real pilot truly was, and that it had nothing to do with medals or bravado. It had to do with control, with calm under fire, with the grace to let others misjudge you without the need to strike back. Emily turned to leave. McAdams didn't stop her. No one did, because the point had been made. Not with anger, not with victory speeches, just a woman, a cockpit, and the truth she carried in silence. And as the door closed behind her, The room remained still, not out of shock anymore, but out of respect, the kind that no rank or ribbon could demand. They would speak of this day in quiet corners. Years later, not as the day someone beat the sim, but as the day they met someone who redefined what it means to fly. What it means to lead. What it means to rise without lifting a single voice. The hallway outside the simulator bay was long, quiet, and empty. Emily walked it alone. No one followed. No one dared. Not out of fear, but out of something deeper. Respect, maybe, or shame, or the quiet understanding that the moment had already passed, and it belonged entirely to her. Her footsteps echoed faintly down the corridor. A slow, steady rhythm, like the last beats of a song that no one in the room had realized they were listening to until it was already over. She didn't ask for a debrief. Didn't wait for recognition. Didn't pause to bask in what she had just done. Because Emily Ross hadn't shown up to be celebrated. She had come to remind people of something they'd forgotten. Back in the bay, General McAdams stood still for a moment before he turned to the officers behind him. "Let it sink in," he said, "then ask yourselves. How many others have you looked past because you couldn't imagine they were better than you?" No one answered. No one had to. By the time McAdams returned to the hallway, Emily was already near the exit doors, the sunlight outside spilling through the glass like a quiet welcome. He didn't call her name. He just walked beside her for a few paces in silence. When he finally spoke, it was low and even. "You didn't have to do that," he said. Emily glanced at him. "I know." He nodded. "But you did." "I had to," she replied. "Not for them. For the next one who walks in looking like me." They stopped just before the exit. For a moment, it felt like time slowed. McAdams looked at her, really looked, the way no one in that room had earlier. This wasn't the first time he'd seen her fly. He remembered her at her peak, before she vanished. Before the silence. "Still won't come back?" he asked quietly. Emily smiled, not with bitterness, but with peace. "They don't need me in the sky," she said. "They need me where no one's looking. Where people like her," she tilted her head back toward the building, "are still invisible." He exhaled slowly. "Then keep flying that way." She nodded once, grateful, grounded, and then she stepped into the sunlight. There were no reporters waiting. No cameras. No applause. No marching band to play her out. Just a breeze. And the distant sound of jets overhead, pilots training. Unaware that the most legendary among them had just walked past quietly. Inside, the candidates slowly began to move again. Quietly collecting their gear. No longer trying to be louder than one another. Just listening, finally, to themselves. Pierce remained in his seat long after most had left. He wasn't thinking about the simulation. He was thinking about the silence. About how it had been louder than any speech, any threat, any call sign ever could. Later that evening, back in his dorm room, he'd open up a dusty old flight manual, one he hadn't touched since basic, and start rereading it from the beginning. Not because he had to. Because he wanted to. Somewhere in the mess of ego and ambition, he'd forgotten why he started flying in the first place. But today reminded him, not with fire, with grace. And across the base, as the sun dipped low and turned the hangars gold, a quiet story began to spread. Word of a woman, a mystery, a pilot who flew without a name tag, but left behind a standard no one could touch. They wouldn't post about her. They wouldn't tag her, but they'd never forget her. Because true greatness doesn't demand attention. It just does the work. Then walks away. And in the end, Emily didn't need a ceremony. Her legacy wasn't something etched in metals. It was written in the silence that followed her footsteps when every arrogant voice fell quiet. And every eye turned inward. She left no trace behind. Except the truth. And that was more than enough. That night, Lockhart wasn't the same. No one issued a formal statement. No review board. No public mention of what had happened in the simulator bay. But it didn't need one. The silence Emily Ross left behind spoke louder than any after-action report. It lingered, in the halls, in the dorms, in the minds of everyone who had watched her. And slowly, it began to settle in. Lieutenant Pierce sat alone in the darkened common room. Eyes fixed on nothing, the coffee in his hand long gone cold. He didn't think about his own flight performance. He thought about hers, about how she never raised her voice, never flinched, About the control in her hands and the calm in her eyes. And most of all, about how she left. She hadn't stayed for praise. She hadn't asked for anything. She had flown better than anyone in the room, and then just walked away. That image refused to leave him. Nearby, Lopez, one of the youngest, had found an old internal directory with a single entry. Ross. E. Flight Ops Division. Classified, no rank, no unit, just a note. Retired, operational reassignment, non-disclosed. He closed the file slowly. And whispered, "We were wrong." At the mess hall, Captain Ramsey replayed the sim footage from earlier. Watched her hands move, steady and precise, as the screen filled with storm. Warning lights, enemy fire. She didn't panic, didn't overcorrect. She trusted the aircraft like she trusted herself. He turned off the monitor and leaned back, the weight of realization sinking in. "I trained kids to chase speed," he muttered. "She taught them how to listen." General McAdams had said very little since. He didn't need to. He had seen this kind of thing before. But rarely had it landed this hard. Because this wasn't just about flying. It was about presence. About grace under judgment. About strength that didn't need an audience. Emily had become a mirror. And everyone who looked into it saw something different: flaws, fear, pride, or the potential to be better. She didn't tear anyone down. She simply revealed them. And maybe that's why it stung the most. Because the truth she carried didn't demand change. It just made it impossible to ignore. In a world that rewards noise, she chose silence. Where others chased applause, she let her actions speak. Emily Ross didn't come to prove anything, she came to remind us. True strength is calm, true leadership is quiet, and true greatness never needs permission to show up. Maybe you've been overlooked, judged too quickly, or told you don't belong. Remember this. You don't have to shout to be heard. Just be steady, be real, and when the moment comes, fly. If her story moved you, hit like and share it with someone who needs to hear this. And comment, "Still here," if you stayed with me till the very end. Because stories like hers deserve to be remembered.